If you're an aftermarket supplier that isn't generating any revenue from social media or isn't generating enough revenue from social media, then the likelihood is that you don't have a funnel that's working for you. Luckily for you, we've done most of the legwork in figuring out and tweaking exactly the funnel that generates millions in revenue for our clients in the aftermarket. In this video, we're going to deep dive into exactly that, with the last point being the silver bullet that's really going to give you the edge amongst your competitors. The first thing that I do want to talk about though is probably the reason why this funnel isn't being built in the first place. And that is because you're treating social media like a brand awareness channel. And honestly, this is an excuse that we hear again and again. And the reality is that it's not a brand awareness channel alone. Of course, it generates brand awareness. However, it's actually one of the highest leverage revenue generating platforms. And when we dilute it and strip that away from social media, that means we create posts for post's sake and we don't actually back it up with any actions that would generate revenue. So let's first understand the context that you need in order to make this funnel successful. Now, the first thing you need to understand is what we call the desired action. Now, in everything that we do in marketing, in sales, what we're trying to make the customer do is move to a next step. This is the desired action. So this is why the second point is actually understanding that customer and what they want and what drives them in order to complete that desired action. And the third thing that you need to know is about the customer journey. So we have a customer journey from unaware to product aware. And in this funnel, we need to move them from that level of awareness to the awareness that we are the solution for them. So when we have these three, the desired action we want them to take, the understanding of our customer and their goals, objections and pain points, and finally the customer journey, this is the place set that we're going to build this funnel upon. If you want to go a bit deeper into how that exactly works, we have an extended workbook matched with a video that we've created that you can download in the description or view the video here. Okay, so the first point of any funnel is going to be our social media post. Now, the social media post needs to speak to three of them. So first, we need to pretty much call out our customer. We need them to understand exactly the pain point that they're currently having from these stages, which I'll explain in a minute. But the other thing that we need them to do is that desired action. So whenever we're going into thinking about a social media post, we need to think, what do we want the customer to do after they read this? That's then how we build upon making them actually do that action. So let's look at this first. So we use a framework called Scope, and I can go a bit into detail about the framework, but instead I want you to understand the mentality around it. So when I mentioned that we want to move them through a funnel, let's first look at what that funnel is. So we have unaware, and then we have product aware. And in the middle, we have a few more steps. So when we go from unaware, we're unaware of the problem that we have. So that workshop that you're currently marketing to, they don't actually know they have that problem that you serve, but they most likely do have it. Then we move into problem aware. So you've now made them aware of the problem, and now they want to look and find if there's a solution to that problem. They then move into solution aware. Once they're solution aware, they're now going to look at what product or service is that solution, and this is when they're comparing you against competitors. So every single time that we're looking at the desired action, we need it to match that journey. For example, if you're unaware, you're not going to make a purchase straight away because you don't even know that you have a problem yet. Instead, you need to be more towards the end of the funnel for that to work. And the issue that we see with so many aftermarket businesses is that they're always talking to this section. And this section typically is 3 to 5% of the market. That means 95% of your customers are in this part of the funnel. So we need to speak to them in order to move them to that end. So now that we understand that, we know who our customer is, we know how we want them to move through the journey, there are assets that we need to put into this journey. So let's get into Scope. So Scope is a framework that we use with the mentality that we have just run through. So now we know who our customer is, what part of the journey that they're in. We now want to write the social media post. First, we have S, which is a stop scroll hook. So this is basically a line or two that hooks the person into actually reading the rest of the post. That is the only objective you have with the hook. How do they read more of the post? Typically, they need to know what's going to be in the post. So it shouldn't be vague, it should encourage them to read and understand what they're going to read next. Then we have C. C is your contextual story. Now, storytelling is the difference between a good post and a bad post. When we're telling a story, they're going to visualize and memorize. And we'll talk about why that's really important soon. Then we have O, and this is your outcome or observation. So in that story, we would have spoken to a pain point that they're currently at and where they are at in the funnel. And that outcome or observation should then reiterate why your solution is the outcome to their current problem. From there, we go into P, which is your prompt, and this is your call to action. And this just means this is the desired step I want you to take. When we don't tell them what the next step is, they don't do it. So this is why most social media posts flop. It's because you're not actually telling them what to do next. It sounds super simple, but is literally the highest way that you are going to convert someone from a post to a sale. Just tell them what to do. Then we have E, and this is exhibit. So you want to choose an image, a graphic, or a short form video that is going to accompany the post. And this can be something that is relevant to the post or something that's a bit more casual, which will also stop the scroll, just like the hook. Now that we have our social media posts, what we need to think of is those desired actions, where are they going? Now, we don't actually need vanity metrics when it comes to next steps. So we don't need them to like the post, we don't need them to share the post, unless we want to boost our post in the algorithm. Instead, what we want to do is move them to a platform that we control or own. Now, this can typically be a long form YouTube video like the one that you're seeing here if you want to build more trust. However, what we're going to look at right now is the actual lead magnets and landing pages that you need to create in order to generate the direct revenue attribution. But just before I get into that, one thing I do want to mention is that everything that we have outlined in this video is a complete done-for-you service by Madly. So if you don't want to spend time doing all this and learning it for yourself, and you just want to skip straight to the revenue generation, then you can look in the link in the description as to how to work with us. So looking at the lead magnets and landing pages now, there's two types of links that you're going to get with Inside Social Media. The first link is going to be in the social media post, and this is where it's relevant to each step of the journey. The second bit is the link in bio. So this is going to be more generic because you don't actually know where the customer is right now or what action they want to create. So this could be your demo booking page, your contact page, or a promotion that you're currently running. This is why it's so important to nail the customer journey, because we need to actually make it specific to the messaging. We need to speak to the pain point that they're currently facing in order to get them to complete that desired action. And the messaging is the most important part of a landing page. So let's take a look at what that is. So a landing page, typically throughout the sections, will have that next desired action. And the important part to understand is that when I'm unaware, I'm not going to book a demo straight away. That is later on. So while I'm unaware, what I might want is a resource that is going to uncover my problem. So I'm going to understand and research whether or not I actually have this problem. So for example, if we created a lead magnet that then uncovered that problem, what is the next thing that we then need them to do? So let's talk about these specific landing pages and lead magnets. First, we need to understand what is a lead magnet. Now, a lead magnet is an asset that is valuable enough for them to want to give you a piece of information. For example, their email address. So what we want to do is, in exchange for their information, we want to give them something of value throughout the stages. If we put this to the unaware customer, for example, they're currently researching whether or not they have this problem, or they're probably talking about a symptom that isn't quite the problem yet. So what is that, and how do we create an asset that allows them to uncover that problem? And what's really important here, and kind of the cool part about this journey, is that when we uncover the symptoms of, oh, you're feeling this, you're feeling this, you're feeling this, oh, that means you have this problem, then what is the customer going to think? They're going to think, oh, well, now I need to solve that problem. And then that moves them to the next step inside your funnel. So this is always what we want to be doing when we're creating these funnels. The main point, though, is the landing page that the lead magnet sits on. So the messaging that we need to create inside this landing page. There's three components that we need to write to when we're creating this landing page. The first one is the customer's goals. The second is their pain points, and third is their hesitations and objections. So at each point of the funnel, your customer is going to have a pain, whether that's the symptom, the pain, the solution that they can't figure out if they need, or the product that they don't know if they want. And they're also going to have goals, which is, I want to get rid of this symptom. I want to get rid of this problem. I want to find the solution. I want to purchase the solution. That is typically the goal that they're going to have because your solution is the answer to their pain. They're also going to have objections and hesitations. So whenever we're crafting our copy for our landing page, we need to tell them, we understand your pain. We know how to get to your goal. And this is why we're going to reassure you against the prior objections that you had to taking this next step. When you answer all of this in a landing page, the conversion rate will 10x because you are speaking exactly to where they are in the funnel, who they are, and the goal and objectives that they want to complete. So the purpose of a lead magnet or a landing page is to get that exchange of information or to book a call or to create that purchase. But what happens if they don't click on your landing page? And this is something that we need to respect in terms of how the customer actually uses social media. So for example, let's think back to the last time you purchased something online that was linked to social. What would have happened is you're scrolling through your phone and you've maybe seen a water bottle that you really like, or a kayak, or something insane. And you've then thought about it, but you've not clicked on social because that's very rare that somebody will do that. Instead, you'll then go away, you'll think about it for a week, you will then Google it, find maybe a competitor or the person that posted on social media, and you will then purchase from there. Now, obviously, as marketers, this is a nightmare for direct attribution, but it is the way that people purchase on social media, so we have to respect that. So the next layer that we need to create is actually look at our website. Now, what's really funny about social media is that when we talk to marketers, they never think about their website, about SEO, because that's dead, right? That's old. However, it's actually the most important part of your social media strategy, because if somebody goes away, how do they get back to you? They're going to search for a key phrase, they're going to search for something that sparked their memory or the product itself. Typically not your brand, unless that was very strong on social, but usually the organic content is a bit more casual than that. So we need to make sure that when those keywords show up, we are ranking for them. So then the second piece to making sure that we're ranking is then balancing SEO with conversions. And this can be difficult because SEO is typically longer form than, say, our landing pages, which would just be, this is the pain you're having, this is the goal you want, this is the hesitation, let's overcome it and go away. Instead, SEO is also talking to search, which really, in realistic terms, means that it's giving you value that it can, but just in a bit of a longer format. So striking that balance is going to be important in order to get people to land and convert to our next action. And the next action is the silver bullet that we were talking about in the beginning. So as I mentioned, all we're trying to do with social is move them to the desired action in order to get a piece of information from the customer. Typically, that piece of information is their email address. Now, why is it that we would want their email address above their bank details? Well, when we have that key piece of information, we can actually then sell on the back end. And this is where we then create our whole new funnel. So on the front end, we have our social post that moves to a landing page that then moves to the email. And on the back end of the email, we know that they could come in unaware, they could come in problem aware, etc. So we also need to make sure that this funnel is in the back end of what we're creating. And the easiest way that we can do this is through segmentation inside our CRM. So what we need to do is this person went on this landing page, so this is the section of the journey that they're in, and that's the language that we need to speak to them. So in order to kind of put this into practice, let's look at how we would actually run this funnel. So first, we have created our social media post using scope. We then have a desired next action. So they move into that desired next action. We then know what type of customer they are and where they are in the journey based on our landing page. And for any of you kind of thinking about this, this is where this funnel is so genius. It's not a standard landing page that everybody else is going to. Instead, it's speaking to the exact problem, goals, and pain points that they currently have. And what's important about that is we have literally spoken about their pain points, their goals, their hesitations. And by them giving us their information, they've confirmed that all of that is true. So then what we need to do is create our email sequences in the back end that then validates that. They say, hey, I noticed that you downloaded this because of X, Y, and Z. Would it be easier if we jumped through a call on exactly how to solve this issue? When we own their email address, we're not betting on whether or not they're going to see a social media post, for example, we know that that is going to go directly into their inbox. And if you have a CRM system like the V8 CRM system, you can also tag salespeople to complete a sales action and chase that particular person. So when we have this funnel in the back end as well, it extends our reach into when we can actually speak to the customer to move them down the funnel much quicker. But this funnel is just a small piece of the wider picture. And for that, you need a social media marketing plan. And this plan has generated millions in revenue for aftermarket suppliers like yourselves. And we know that because we ran it and created it ourselves. Now, if you want this exact plan, we have created an extended workbook plus a step-by-step video so you can literally steal how this works. You can get it by clicking the video on the screen.